Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video we'll be taking a look at the successor to the granddaddy of the 120mm tower cooler. This is the Hyper 212 EVO V2. Keep watching to find out more. Okay, so in today's video we'll be taking a look at Coolermaster's Hyper 212 EVO version 2. So this is the highly anticipated successor to the original Hyper EVO 212, which, if you're old enough to remember, was one of the first real 120mm tower coolers which actually made a massive impact on the market and has basically influenced CPU cooling pretty much from there on in. Almost all of the subsequent coolers on the market since those early days have been pretty much based around the 120mm tower cooler design with heat pipes and a 120mm fan. Yeah, this is pretty much what began the entire PC cooling revolution. Obviously there were previous coolers such as the bizarre windmill type ones and the Zalman flowers, that kind of thing. But when this came out, this was a real game changer for a lot of people, especially for those of us that were on possibly AM3 processors, the old AMD FX range, which were rather thermonuclear in running, and swapping out the stock cooler for one of these dramatically changed CPU temperatures. So looking forward now in 2021, is it still a valid choice for your CPU, and is it actually any easier to install? Those are some of the things that we're going to be trying to find out in this particular video. We will be doing some tests later on against the Ryzen 9 3900X, and I'm actually going to compare it against the Noctua D15, which is a completely unfair fight, but I wanted to know how well this actually stacks up now against something which costs approximately 4 times the price. So let's take a look at the packaging and we'll see what has actually changed in the V2 over the original 212 EVO. So taking a look at the packaging, as you can see things have been updated slightly, and I wish I actually had one of the older ones here with me now so I could compare directly, but sadly that has gone into a system and is long gone. But this one now supports LGA 1200 socket and also has a massive range of supported CPUs from both AMD and Intel. I'll put that up on the screen for you now so you can see what CPU sockets it actually supports, but pretty much it is everything apart from Threadripper. So on the front of the box, it really kind of sums up what has actually changed. So as you can see, it says Hyper 212 EVO V2 with new install brackets and SickleFlow 120mm fan. So essentially that is pretty much all they've done. They've added some new installation material, they've improved the CPU cooling fan, and also they've offset the heat pipes, which we'll take a look at shortly. And talking of that, it actually goes into more depth about what has changed on the side of the box. So yeah, we've got the SickleFlow 120mm fan, we've got the asymmetric 4 heat pipe design, and also there is 4 of those direct contact heat pipes, which is pretty much carried over from the original design and is still very popular with pretty much all CPU cooler manufacturers on the planet right now. So looking at the specifications on the back, the one thing which most of you are going to be interested in is actually how big it is. So the total height of this is 155mm, so this means it's going to fit into pretty much most ATX, micro ATX and ITX cases. Obviously do check with your manufacturer first of all, but normally anything around about the 150 to 155mm mark fits almost kind of 95% of all cases on the market. On the other side of the box it goes into some more of those technical specifications, so I'll give you a close-up of that, but some of the key takeaways of this are the fact that it's a 650 to 1800 RPM fan, and the fan has a noise level between 8 and 27 dBA. Other than that, most of the measurements actually match up to the original design. So that's enough talking about it, let's see what we actually get inside of the box. So this is what we get actually inside the packaging. So first of all, obviously, you get the cooler itself and the pre-attached fan. You also get a box of installation goodies. There's a warranty information guide and the 212 V2 installation guide. Now this you probably will need. There are an absolute metric ton of installation parts for this. I know they did say on the box that they've updated the installation method, but actually the fact that it needs this much of a guide to tell you what components you need is pretty scary, and given the amount of time they've had to actually refine the design of this, well over 10 years, you'd think by now they'd have simplified it a little bit. But so let's take a closer look at actually what is included in the installation kit. So first of all, there is a PWM cable splitter. So this is one of the cool things about the Coolermaster 212 EVO V2. It does come included with the SickleFlow fan, but you can, if you want, you can add an additional one to put on the rear to give you that push-pull configuration. Although realistically, most people find that with a 2-fan setup, you normally only drop maybe somewhere between 3 to 5 degrees maximum. So Whether or not it's worth the investment, that is obviously down to you, but certainly I think we'll go with the single fan for this installation. Next up, there is a bag of the installation components, and yeah, it's not a great look, it really isn't. There is an absolute ton of stuff here. So obviously you're not going to need all of it at the same time. You do get included some extra fan mounting brackets. These are really good actually. The brackets make fitting the fans onto these towers a lot easier. I would much rather have these plastic clips, although the plastic clips have actually reduced in size and seemingly in quality over the original 212, which had some really thick plastic ones. These certainly do get the job done, but they are a little bit on the cheap side. Also included is a backplate, so you will need this to install the cooler. Sadly, we don't have to use the standard AMD or Intel backplates. You do have to use this, and it is printed on one side AMD and Intel on the other. So when you're looking at the AMD side, it kind of makes sense to you. Although the instructions could be a little bit clearer, as we'll see when we go through the installation. Also included are the brackets for actually installing the CPU cooler. So these are for the AMD version, and these ones are for the Intel version. Now for the one we're doing today, we're going to be doing AMD. So if you want to see how the Intel one is done, then don't forget to click on the subscribe button and the chime icon, and we'll be doing that in a follow-up video. Our next little baggie is our plastics and also some thermal paste. So this does come with 8 plastic clips in there. So you've got 4 of which are for AMD, 4 for Intel, and also you've got a pot of thermal compound or a little tube. That is the Master Gel Pro liquid. Next up is all of this stuff. So this is the rest of our components used for fitting the system. Now luckily they've made it so it's actually quite easy to differentiate between the two. So if you've got one which has only a thread on one end of the actual bolt, then that is the AMD one. If you've got ones which have got screw threads on both sides, that is the Intel one. So again, it's relatively easy to work out what you need, but you just have to go through it in a methodical way, and obviously you have got the instruction manual to back up your intelligence. When it comes to installing the cooler, it does say quite clearly here which bits you need. So if you're using Intel LGA 1366, etc., then you need B, C, F, H, I, and J. If you're doing Intel 2066, etc., then there's other bits, and for AMD, then you need the B, D, G, H, I, and J parts. So yeah, let's get on with it. So that's all the parts that would get included. I wanted to actually just quickly take the fan off the front here, and actually you can see how easy it is to do. The clips on the side are really handy, and also if you want to mount maybe the fan a little bit higher because of RAM clearance, you can do, although they do pretty much guarantee that RAM clearance shouldn't be an issue with this. Because we've now got this offset design, so it pushes the tower back a little bit, it does give almost 100% clearance for RAM modules, which is brilliant to see. Also as well, they've updated the fin, so we've got a slightly more dense fin stack, and also they've added a few extra small features, such as the way that the actual pipes are laid out to allow airflow to pass through them in an optimal configuration, and even small things like the little tiny punch outs in the top there, which create turbulence within the frame itself, and again are designed to aid airflow. On the bottom you can see that the heat pipes are come through and they're exposed and polished to a particularly high standard, and it does feel pretty smooth under there. Obviously if you want to, you can lap it slightly to give you a mirror finish, but realistically you shouldn't need to. Another nice feature is the fact that the screws which actually hold everything in are actually captive screws, and they're pre-sprung, so no fishing around with a screwdriver into your tower cooler trying to get the darn thing to fit. So it looks like we've got a ton of installation to do, so let's get our donor system and start getting it fixed up. Okay, so this is our AMD kit here. So as you can see from the installation, so we've got section B, we've got section D, we've got section G, which is our brackets. Actually, we haven't got those, they are over here still. So we'll be needing those also. So backplate, these little plastic clips here. We'll also be needing the little standoffs here, and then the standoffs without the double thread. And also we'll be needing these at the very end, which are the little thumb screws to actually hold it all tight. So the most complicated bit of this is actually working out what goes where. Now, as you can see, there are at the moment probably about 20 individual components, which is way too much really, but it does give you that universal platform availability. So yeah, we'll go with it. So if you look at the actual piece itself, this does say AMD on it. You can see it says AMD there, and the other side says Intel in those corners there. So when you're looking at it, you want to be looking from the AMD side, and what we want to do first of all is to put these little things in, these little standoffs, and these go into these corners here. And when you put them in, just make sure they go as close as possible to the Intel mounting. That is for AM4. If you want to use it for AM2 or AM3, just put it into the next one up in that upper position there. So we want it in that position there. Now what we do is grab one of these little plastic lugs. This is what holds it all in place. And all we need to do is to push that over, and that locks into place. And as you can see, that has now held that pin relatively firmly in place. So all we need to do is do that another 4 times in the other 4 corners. So again, put a little bolt through into that section there, closest to that part there, which is the Intel part, and then put this little plastic bit over, snap it into place, and again, that's going to hold it into place. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other 2, and then we'll come back. So the next thing to do is to put our assembled backplate on the rear. So I'm just going to push this through. Obviously make sure you've removed your existing AM4 backplate, and then we want to take these type screws, the ones which have got a thread on one end and empty in the other, and just tighten those up. And they are threaded to a certain point, so you don't have to over tighten them, just do them hand tight. And it is a little bit wobbly on there, but don't worry about that too much. And we'll just do the last one. So there we go, that is that in place now. So the next part to do is to actually put in our AM4 brackets. So all we need to do is to put those on like that. Obviously, if you're putting these on in the flat situation, it is considerably easier, but because we're trying to film this for your entertainment purposes, it isn't quite as easy. You may find putting a little bit of pressure on the back actually is quite helpful. And just make sure those are done up quite tight. You can use a screwdriver if you wanted to, entirely up to you. But I'm just going to use thumb tight. So this is very similar really to the Noctua style mounting, although this is obviously going top to bottom, whereas Noctua's one goes side to side. It is a very similar design. So when it's done, there will be a little bit of play in it, but don't worry about that too much, because that'll get taken up when we actually put the processor cooler on, and when we tighten up these bolts on the side, it will just pull it all taut. So yeah, don't worry about that too much, that's absolutely fine. So next up, we're going to put a little bit of our thermal paste. This is the Master Gel Pro. And we don't need a great deal on here, so we'll just put a little tiny blob in the middle section there. That should be absolutely fine. Next part, obviously installing the cooler, so make sure you remove the plastic off the bottom. That is very important, otherwise things will go very bad very quickly. Now what we're going to need to do is make sure that these are angled correctly. So we want them so they're angled away from the RAM sticks, which are here. So we're going to have it kind of like that. So as you can see, the heat pipes are kind of tailored towards the back of the machine. So ideally you want to put this in a flat situation if at all possible. But in our particular instance, we are a little bit unable to because of the way we're fitting it. So I'm going to grab a screwdriver and just going to tighten those screws up into the 2 holes there and there. So now you can see we've got the screws on both sides, so just a couple of turns just to get it started. And then we'll do exactly the same on the other side. So when you've got both screws in just a little bit, then you can go through and tighten it up slightly, a couple of turns, and then just repeat the process on both sides. This is quite difficult for me to do actually, because I cannot see the other side of the CPU because the camera's in the way. But just a few screws each side. And keep going until it feels like it won't go anymore. And then if you want to, you can just give it a little rock just to make sure it is firmly attached. You should find there is a little, very slight amount of wobble there, very little, but you shouldn't find that the actual back plate is now moving at all. So That's absolutely awesome. So the next part to do is to install the cooling fan. And this bit is actually super simple. I really do love how easy this is. All we need to do is just route the cable underneath, and all we want to do is just get these bits latched on over these sections here. So very simple to do. And actually, because of how much clearance you've got over the RAM, it does make life that much easier. And that is essentially it. So that is installed. Just give it a little wiggle, make sure it doesn't want to go anywhere. But yeah, that is pretty much it. And when it's done, it will look something like this. Just make sure that the fan blade spins okay and it isn't touching anything. And as you can see, there is an absolute ton of clearance between the RAM. So even if you've got particularly high RAM, you should be absolutely fine. Last part of it to do is to plug in the PWM connector into the fan header, which on the top on this board is just here. And then the rest of the cabling we can just tuck through, pull through the top there to keep things nice and tidy. So I'm going to go ahead now and put the graphics card back in, get this thing fired up and do some thermal tests. Okay, so we've done the installation, done the testing, and as I expected, this thing has done surprisingly well. Now I should really talk about pricing of this. So at the moment in the UK, this retails for somewhere in the region of about £28 to £33, depending where you get it from. I did find CCL was a particularly good bargain at the moment. This does often pick up on Amazon with ridiculous kind of 40% off deals. So do definitely look out for that. If you're not too sure, there is a link in the video description. You can click on it, leave it in your basket, and you'll be notified when there's massive price changes. I actually managed to pick this up on a deal for £18.99. Now for less than £20, this is phenomenal value for money. It really is. And even at £30, I still think this holds a very, very high standard for all the other coolers on the market to kind of try and step up to. There's tons of other ones that you can try. There's things like the EVO V2, which is essentially the same design but with a little bit of RGB thrown in, and is a very similar price and pretty much performs very, very similarly. So ultimately it's going to be cut down to things like installation, the company itself. There are quite a lot of Coolermaster fanboys out there, so yeah, if you are a Coolermaster fanboy, then obviously this is going to be the one to go for. But like I said, performance wise, this thing still kicks some ass. Now we've done some Cinebench runs on this between our Noctua D15, which is obviously a considerably more expensive cooler, in and around the sort of £80 to £85 mark. This, again, for £20 is like a quarter of the price. So yeah, it isn't a quarter of the performance, that is for darn sure, and I'll go through some of those results now. So with the D15, and this is running Cinebench R23, I've left my system completely untouched, so just the standard defaults after resetting the motherboard. I've adjusted the fan curves on both so that when it gets to 65 degrees or higher, everything's at 100%. So the processor is likely to get to that sort of temperature anyway, so there's no unfairness, they're both running at full blast. So running the D15, like I said, full blast, we've got a Cinebench R23 score of 17373. Temperature wise, minimum temperature recorded was 44 degrees and maximum was 67 degrees. Now when we switched over to the 212 EVO V2, we didn't do quite as well on Cinebench, so we got 17028. So yeah, we're looking about 350 points less there. Minimum temperature wise, only 2 degrees difference. So this bottomed out at 46 degrees C and maxed out at 73 degrees C. So we're looking at about 6 degrees difference on the high end and about 2 degrees difference on the low end, which makes perfect sense. Obviously, when it comes to kind of lower temperatures, this is going to cope with it very easily. When we get to those higher temperatures and pushing those 12 cores and 24 threads in Cinebench, obviously it is going to push this thing to the absolute limits. But there was no throttling as such. The actual clock speeds were slightly lower, didn't throttle as such, but just didn't boost as high as it would have done with the D15. So there's a 50 to 100 megahertz difference across the cores. So there is that to it. If you're looking for the utmost performance you can get out of your processor, then obviously spending more money on something like the D15 is going to make a little bit of sense. But I think for most people, using this in your system is going to be absolutely fine. Processor wise, even if you're looking at something a little bit lower down the range, like a Ryzen 5 2600, 3600, 5600, those kinds of processors, this is all you need. It really is. Get rid of your stock cooler, replace it with one of these. It is actually a lot quieter than the D15 as well. The new sickle flow fan is actually pretty quiet, although at full load it does get a little bit noisy, but realistically, most people aren't going to run it at full blast 24/7, so for those odd bursts, it's absolutely fine. So overall, what do I think? Well, obviously, yeah, it's a Coolermaster product, so it's got a lot of heritage to it. There is a soft spot that I have for this particular cooler after the days with the original version, which still is just a great cooler. You can still buy them now, but they do sometimes come with the older clips. These ones are actually not too bad to install, as we saw from the video. It is a little bit fiddly working out which bit is which, but certainly once you've got the bits done and you're kind of a little bit used to it, absolutely brilliant. Obviously, if you want to increase the cooling a little bit more, you can add that extra fan if you want to with the included equipment, which would then actually probably put it a little bit closer to the D15, which again is still phenomenal considering the price difference and even the size difference. So overall, I would say if I was to give this a star rating, it's got to be a 4.5 out of 5. It's almost perfect, not quite, a little bit more RGB, maybe a little bit of black on those heat sinks would make things a lot better. But again, for the price, if you can pick it up on one of those bargain deals at less than 20 quid, yeah, rip someone's arm off and buy one. It really is a fantastic cooler. So let me know what you think about this one in the comments section below. But in the meantime, I've been Mike. This is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.